In our news chat today, we're going to be discussing free school meals. Obviously, it comes following a government U-turn on extending the free school meal scheme into the summer holidays, following a campaign by footballer Marcus Rashford. So joining me in the programme is co-leader of the Green Party for England and Wales, Jonathan Bartley. We'll also hear from Foodshare Chief Executive Lindsay and Ian Sterling from the Manchester United Supporters Trust. So thanks very much for joining us, guys. Jonathan, if I can come to you first, although the government did change their mind in the end, do you still think more is to be done to support children during these difficult times?
Oh, absolutely. The numbers of children in poverty in this country, runs into millions. It doesn't bear thinking about. And we know there's been more evidence today from the Roundtree Trust and others who are working with those who are really at the sharp end, that many people are having just to choose between whether they're able to eat or not a meal. It is absolutely staggering that in the 21st century we haven't seen more support from government. We knew that child poverty was already at colossal and unacceptable levels before this crisis began. Now it is even worse. So we need urgent interventions. We need much more than what the government is providing, and we would suggest things like a universal basic income, which makes sure that no one loses out, no one falls through the cracks. And of course, that can be clawed back through progressive taxation from those who don't need the help.
Yeah, and Lindsay, how much did you welcome the decision that was taken?
Well, we've been pushing and campaigning for this for a long time. I had the biggest smile on my face you can possibly imagine yesterday. So, what Marcus has achieved is absolutely remarkable and fantastic. However, what he said was so articulate, authentic and compelling that I really felt that, this U-turn wasn't a surprise at the end of the day. I know governments never like doing U-turns, but this one just looked like it was just so sensible and obvious that I couldn't believe that they weren't going to do it. But let's be clear, and we'll perhaps come on to this later on in the chat. Let's be clear, this only is a sticking plaster for 6 weeks of the summer.
Yeah, and Ian, can you tell us the sort of motivation behind this from Rashford? Did he have these sort of struggles when he was a child? Is that why he was sort of campaigning to do this?
Yeah, I mean, he's made it public himself. He was the child of a single mother who accessed free school meals himself. Comes from a bit of a tough area in Manchester, in Wythenshawe. That has its economic struggles there. Obviously found it hard, and it's just so, there's so much bad press at the moment about footballers. Matt Hancock himself added to that, putting the pressure back on them, asking them to do something. So for Marcus to come out and do this and be true to his word and true to his roots as well, gives me immense pride in him. Not only as a young black man, 22 years old, considering what else is going on in the world at the moment and the challenges that are faced, but also as a Manchester United supporter, great to see one of the players standing up for one of their own.
Yeah, and Jonathan, going back to yourself, is it a bit alarming that it took a 22-year-old footballer to make the government aware of this issue and child poverty as well?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to detract at all from what Marcus Rashford achieved. He achieved what no other politician in this country could do, and that is absolutely staggering. And I hope that he doesn't let things rest there. I hope he goes on. But it is, the question has to be asked: how is it that we are relying on professional footballers to be the moral voice of this country and to call the government to account? And indeed, let's not forget that Marcus Rashford himself has financially, forked out money to help children, as other professional footballers have done. We should not have to rely on professional footballers and their charity as well. In the same way, we shouldn't have to rely on charity to support our national health system. We've got to a Victorian situation where we're relying on the wealthy to be philanthropic and to provide what should be absolutely basic fundamental services and the observation of fundamental human rights: to eat, to have a basic standard of healthcare. These are things that should not rely on charity, and they shouldn't rely on professional footballers to call for them.
Yeah, and Jonathan, just staying with you, I was just listening to the PMQs there, and Ian Blackford, the SNP Westminster leader, he basically summed it up as that Marcus Rashford has done more for child poverty than a Tory government has done in the past decade. Do you think that's a fair comment?
It's hard to argue with it, really. And the problem is that this Conservative government has, in a sense, taken us backwards, has turned back the clock, has made the situation worse. We haven't seen child poverty get better. We've seen it get progressively worse. We've seen massive cuts from the welfare state over the last 10 years to the tune of £36 billion. Now, that isn't even, that is more than the furlough scheme has cost so far. You know, that puts it in perspective. That's what we've taken out of welfare before this crisis started. So it's absolutely right for Ian Blackford to say that. And I think probably all opposition parties are saying it.
Yeah. Lindsay, has FoodShare witnessed more families than ever struggling since the pandemic hit from your charity's point of view?
Yeah, so I mean, at FareShare, we've seen more than a doubling in the volumes of people that we are supporting and serving. So before the pandemic, we were supplying just under 1 million meals a week. We're now over 3 million meals a week. Now let's just put it into context. You know, who's getting that food and where's it going to? So by far the largest, well over 60%, are going to families with children. These are through frontline charitable organisations who are providing an incredibly vital safety net for people who have got problems. I entirely agree with Jonathan in that the absolute number one priority is people should not need to come to those 11,000 organisations. People should not have to go to a food bank. And what this intervention and the 120 million has over the summer has enabled is fewer people needing to go through that lack of dignity of being able to ask their own community to support them. And so whilst organisations like mine exist, and you know, there's some subtlety and nuance about what we do, and I'll come to that in a second. The key and fundamental thing is people should be able to feed themselves, and that links into the benefit system. It links into the living wage and the minimum wage, and the whole approach that we take as a society to the taxes we pay, and so on and so on. Yeah,
and Ian, will a lot of children potentially benefit from this, particularly in Manchester? As you were saying, Rashford comes from sort of disadvantaged background himself, so will this sort of be welcomed in the community?
It is welcome within the football community. As football fans, obviously, we're proud of Rashford as a player. It's politics and football is a funny mix, especially with football supporters. We all come from different backgrounds, just as we have done here. But this is unified, and it's kind of concentrated people's thoughts. As a supporters trust, and actually many football supporters trusts across the country, run match day food banks as a collection point to support local food banks. It really is a position we shouldn't be in at all. Why is it that footballers and supporters have to run these initiatives to actually just to feed people? What is so difficult about ensuring that children don't go hungry? So although I applaud not only Rashford's initiative with this and FareShare and all the other food banks, it really is a position that we shouldn't be in at all. The club themselves, our food bank, Manchester United donated £50,000 to our food banks. But what I want to come out of this is actually a realisation from football supporters. Football is a unifying force amongst people. I go to a match and I mix with people across all political landscapes, from all economic landscapes, from all different kinds of backgrounds and all abilities. Is the realisation that football can be used for something for good, and there's nothing wrong with addressing these issues. The only reason it is political is because the political party in government has decided to ignore it. That's the reason why it's political. So what I want to see from football supporters from this is to get behind supporting their community, supporting their people, and helping those most that need. But after all, what we should be doing is judging society for how we treat the most vulnerable, and there's nothing more vulnerable than a child going hungry.
Yeah, and Jonathan, I saw you tweet yesterday about the government's priorities, as in they bailed out quite a lot of big multinational companies, but before the decision was made, obviously we had that sort of delay with the decision of what was going to happen with children that might go hungry or not. Do you want to just talk about that tweet you were what you were mentioning in it?
Yeah, I just listed out what the government had bailed out and was pointing out that it wasn't bailing out children who needed food to eat, but it was bailing out Rolls-Royce, it was bailing out fossil fuel industries, bailing out companies that have already received massive subsidies for many, many years. Now, of course, we've got to protect jobs, and we need a massive investment in job creation. We've got to recognise that many of these industries that we're bailing out have a very limited shelf life. We know that the aviation industry is never going to be the same again, so we need to provide new jobs to make sure that those families and those workers are supported in perpetuity for many, many years to come. So it wasn't so much a criticism of the government supporting workers. What it was saying is if we're going to support these industries, then surely we should be putting food in the mouths of our most vulnerable children. And I think we need to have a long, hard look at what this pandemic and the response to it has revealed in terms of our priorities as a country. We've already seen those who were previously considered just low-paid workers. We now recognise they are key workers. They are workers, the deliverers, the teaching assistants, those who work in hospitals and shops. We all rely on them. They are the backbone of our economy, and they are the ones that have allowed this massive wealth that we've generated over the last few decades to be created. We would not have that wealth without an education system to look after our children and to educate our workforce, or a transport system to move goods around the country and move people into work and out of work. So let's make sure that all those low paid, but now who we recognise are key workers, are supported, and they don't just have food to eat, that they are able to live the lives that they deserve for giving so much to us and making sure that we can enjoy previously a wonderful standard of living and make sure that that continues. But it means hard choices about who we are going to support and who we prioritise. And of course, that comes down to a government's values. You see in its spending what a government does value and what a government doesn't value. You see the government's values laid bare. And if we're going to continue to provide massive subsidies to corporations but not look after the most vulnerable, it's very, very clear that the government's values are wrong.
Yeah, and Lindsay, Jonathan was mentioning there about sort of things that we've learned from this pandemic. So what would you say your charity has learned from this, and what do you think we should be doing now as a country moving forward?
Well, within FareShare's agenda, we've got a really clear ask, and that's why I'm really pleased to be on this call with Jonathan, because in normal times, what FareShare does is redistribute food that is in the supply chain, i.e. from farmers' fields through to factories, that is surplus, and we get that to frontline charities that are struggling to have the budget to be able to buy that food. So currently we save the 11,000 charities we work with about £35 million every year. But Jonathan, there is 650 million meals worth of food wasted in the UK supply chain that is fit to feed people. And my organisation firmly and fundamentally believes that no good food should go to waste, and the best thing to do with that food is to feed it to people, not to turn it into energy, not to stick it into compost, but to feed people if there are people who are hungry. And as we know, after the pandemic, we're going to have a lot more people who are hungry and will go hungry as a result of the impacts of the pandemic, leaving the politics of that aside. We know that if we could get to the same amount of redistribution that, say, a country like France does of surplus food, and we have the capacity to be able to deal with it, which would only be 5% of all of that food that's wasted in farmers' fields, that would be, in CO2 terms, the equivalent of taking 165,000 cars off the road for a year. And what I'd love to do is share with you our really simple policy asks, and ask that the Green Party really get behind those asks and help us try and get some traction with the government on them. Because if we can do that, then we can have enough food to redistribute 10 million meals every single week rather than the 3 million that we're doing at the moment.
Yeah, and Jonathan, do you have anything to add on Lindsay's call there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, 100% behind them. Have a look at the manifesto. Have a look at our policies. You know, we reckon that there's enough sun and there's enough wind and there's enough wave. You know, it's unlimited. Let's face it, to provide the renewable energy that we need. We don't need to be taking the food and generating energy out of it if we can give it to people that are hungry. And I'm in this not to save the planet. I'm in this to save people. You know, and if we can't provide people with the basic food to eat, you know, we might as well pack up and go home. And of course, the inefficiency of our supply chains, the inefficiency of our systems, has to be called into question. The Conservative government often tries to present itself as a party of efficiency. You couldn't be further from the truth. There is waste, there is mismanagement, and we need to be saying, you know, we need to do more with less. And it is an absolute scandal, the levels of food that are, you know, not just recycled for energy or are not given to people, but are just discarded and thrown away. So I can 100% commit my support and support my party to what you're asking.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, and Ian, I'll just come to yourself. If you've been pleased with Manchester United's response during the pandemic, they have invested quite a lot in the sort of local community, haven't they?
Yes, they have. The Manchester United Foundation has worked very closely supporting a local NHS hospital, Salford Royal Hospital, which incidentally my daughter works at. So I'm extra proud for that. It's delivered free meals out. It's the trainees, the apprentices, the young children that they work with that continue to support them throughout the pandemic. And it's it's what football should be and football clubs should be about. I mean, we went through a period for quite a while where football was seen as just a commercial juggernaut, where overflowing with money, and fans played second fiddle to all that. In fact, the very people that we're trying to feed here with these initiatives were priced out of football. So it's welcoming to see the move or an adjustment of attitudes towards the local community. These clubs are traditionally embedded in communities. After all, that's where the name, whether it be Millwall, whether it be Manchester, whether it be Birmingham, they're embedded in those communities, and they really should be looking after them and have strong ties with them. So it makes me proud of Manchester United's response. It makes me proud to see players like Marcus Rashford and Juan Mata as well, who set up his own foundation, where they want to help those communities, those people who are less advantages of themselves, and those people who have a tougher start in life. And I hope to see Marcus Rashford carry on with this fight in terms of more equality for people, more help for those people with a less advantageous start in life. And I want to use it also as a call to supporters to get behind these initiatives and join in them themselves. Otherwise, it's no point just putting the pressure on the politicians if the supporters aren't there to give their help as well.
Yeah, and Jonathan, do you feel there's obviously we saw the economic figures yesterday, and the crisis just seems to get worse and worse every day when we look at the news. But do you think there is a sort of imminent way back once we start to find our feet again?
I think we've just lost Jonathan.
Oh, did we? Oh,
yeah.
So, all right. Well, I'll quickly move on to yourself, Ian, again. So obviously the Premier League's restarting tonight. How do you feel, Man United fans? How are Man United fans feeling about the resumption of the campaign? Has it been welcomed, or are there any sort of concerns? Because obviously a lot of people are dying and the infection rate is still quite high.
I mean, it's as our allegiance as a Manchester United fan, it's nice to see the season null and voided for obvious reasons. But it's that's about rivalry with Liverpool. But the actual practicalities of it is the Premier League would have to continue. Obviously, there's massive financial implications for the clubs, not just in the Premier League, but lower down as well. We know that the Premier League help in terms of transfer fees and the publicity that helps. It trickles down into the lower leagues. Safety is the paramount importance. for a lot of Manchester United season ticket holders, it'll be strange just having to watch the football on the TV. Most of us attend the games, and all our the majority of our social life, our social circle, our interaction, our friends, it all kind of revolves around football. So it's going to be a strange thing just having to watch it on TV without having that social interaction with people. It's the community and the camaraderie of friends, which is a big part of football for us. So although we welcome the resumption, we're more looking forward to next season starting and supporters being in the stadium when it's safe to do so. And we've worked quite closely with the club, giving our concerns about the resumption of football and supporters going in the ground. And United have been happy to work with us with that and answered all our questions and concerns. So that's complete this season. Hopefully we'll qualify for Champions League football next year, and the season can resume with supporters in the stadium as soon as it's safe to do so.
Yeah, and Lindsay, are you sort of surprised that the Premier League is making a return tonight? Obviously, because we've been talking about, you yourself have noticed your charity. There is a lot of families and people that are struggling during the pandemic, but we've sort of prioritised sport to make such a quick return. Has that surprised you? And what's just your general thoughts?
Yeah, I think the way that they're doing it, I think Ian will probably agree with me in this. I think we all take confidence of the fact that we're following in the footsteps of the Germans because they're super efficient and they've proved that the system seems to work. Okay, the experience isn't going to be quite what it was. And actually, if you're going through hardship, sometimes organisations challenge us about why would we give out chocolate when people are hungry? Because actually, do you know what? When life is pretty rubbish, sometimes you deserve a treat. And just because somebody may have lost their job or whatever, the fact that actually the football's coming back on again could be the sort of thing that just actually gives them a bit of a pickup. So, and we all deserve that. We've got to start somewhere, and I think the Premier League coming back tonight is a really positive step, and it kicks off full time on from the weekend. It'll be very weird to have a look at what it all looks like, but bring it on, but bring it on safely.
And Ian, obviously football being taken out of a community like Manchester, but it heavily relies on it. How much of an impact has it had on the area?
It's difficult to judge, really. It's obviously been. I've just been out around Manchester myself, and it's like being out on a Sunday 20, 30 years ago. Everything's just so quiet. The life's been taken out of the city. And football is a big part of that in Manchester. Obviously, we've got United, this city. There's a National Football Museum there. Manchester's a big tourist destination for sports lovers. So it removes the part of your being. You've not got that interaction with people. You're not down the pub speaking about football, discussing football. You've only got social media for that at the minute, which can be, a bit dull at times. So it's not quite the same with it being on TV, but it's part of that step towards normality coming back again. But Manchester thrives on football. The history of football, the Football League started in Manchester. You look at Piccadilly Gardens; it's where the first meeting of the Football League was ever held. So Manchester has its roots in football, and when it's going to be a great day when we're going to be allowed back in the stadium for it. We don't know, what's going to happen in terms of social distancing and what facilities are going to have to change inside the grounds. But we can't wait to get back in the ground as supporters. We want to support players like Marcus, support the club for what they've done during the pandemic, and repay that faith that they've shown in us.
Yeah, Lindsay, I'll just direct this question to you just because I tried to ask Jonathan it, but he dropped out. So do you think there is a sort of way back we can come from this? Obviously, you've sort of witnessed yourself the struggles that people have lived through, and how long do you sort of think it will take for a sort of normality to come back and a less bit of scarring on our brains?
Yeah, I mean, and Paul, that's possibly one above my pay grade, but in terms of what we do know is that with large numbers of people losing their jobs, and I think Ian referred to it earlier on, we've only just seen the beginning of some of these stories, and the end of furloughing in itself is going to create further loss of, and particularly concerned about people who are on 0 hours contract or the gig economy, where social distancing and security around contracts is not there. So as an organisation, we're expecting the next couple of years to be pretty grim in terms of increased number of people needing to turn to frontline organisations to help them solve their problems. Hunger is only a symptom of those problems. It's more fundamental issues, whether it's mental health, whether it's financial stability, whether it's the breakdown of their relationships, etc., etc. But what we can do is use food to connect people who are vulnerable and who have issues and problems with then the organisations who have the love, the care and the support and the advisory services that can help those people then rebuild their lives. And those communities are really important in the same way as the football community is really important. And, and Marcus has done an amazing job to help us get through the summer. There's a huge amount of work that needs to be done to help us get on beyond the summer over the next couple of years. Whether it's 2 years, 3 years, or whatever, as I say, that's the one that's above my pay grade. Yeah.
Ian, as Lindsay was just saying there, that the work that Marcus has done for the summer, is that sort of was he already a really respected figure across Manchester? I know he's just a young kid, but will this sort of even just further sort of increase that popularity with him?
Well, look, he's been at United since he was 7 years old. He loves football. It would be easy for a young man to get lost in football. He's fine. He's never going to go hungry. He doesn't. There's no responsibility for him to have to take up this cause. But the respect for him was there before as a footballer and as a person. Everyone recognised that he was a young man. And this has gradually come through. And there's been these kind of stories over the summer. There's the one where he was judging a poetry contest and he's learnt sign language because some of the students were deaf. It's little things like that. The money that he's raised, the initiatives he's shown for homeless people in Manchester, for the massive homelessness problem in Manchester, which is going to get even worse. And then this with wanting to feed children who would be without school meals during the summer. It's just another step. And this is a 22-year-old man that has done this. He's with so many troubles in the world at the moment. A young, positive, strong black man who's come out and is such a fantastic role model, not only to his own community, but the whole of football supporters as well. Someone who we can look up to, who encapsulates actually the good in society. And it's not often that you can say that about a football player. They are derided in society. They're derided by MPs. If you look at Matt Hancock's comments about footballers, well, he's been shown up a little bit now, hasn't he, by Marcus Rashford coming in doing this and then having to make the government make a U-turn and then couldn't even get his name right on TV this morning, calling him Daniel Rashford. It's so for Marcus as a man to stand up, back his principles with actions, and to see it through and get a result like this, when it could be very easy for him to just melt in the background, collect his money. He's always going to be rich. He's never going to be without, but he's remembered his roots. And as I said before, what I want to see with this is it inspire supporters as well, that they can, be a positive change themselves. They can support food banks. They can support local initiatives, even getting younger supporters, bringing people into football. We've got a scheme at United where you can donate your ticket and it can go to people who wouldn't usually be able to afford to get inside the ground. Build on things like that. Be more welcoming of different sectors of society. It's easy to point the fingers at football supporters. It was done at the weekend. These marches in London where people were, peeing against memorials. First thing they did was say football supporter. They weren't football supporters, they were thugs. But it's easy to put the label as football supporter on them because everything football supporters does is bad.